Hey, welcome to How to Build Your Own Home. This is Keith. I want to talk about decks and how to do them right. This here is the finished product of a deck I've just completed for a mountain home in actually southwestern Utah, up in the Pine Valley area. I want to go over a couple of things that I think you should look for or look into when it comes to doing a deck. One of the number one things that I like to do with decks is I like a full membrane floor system. I don't like a typical slatted situation where weathering and water and rain and snow can work its way down into the substrate, into the frame structure, and eventually do a number on that. I like to get the water off as quick as I possibly can. Now, there's a lot of different products. I can't really recommend any particular product, but any product that can withstand a lot of bad temperatures and a lot of weather put on it over a long period of time. That means that below this liquid applied floor system that you see here, I've got 3/4 inch sub TNG tongue and groove flooring. And then, of course, build up the liquid applied membrane on top of that. And that gets the water off. Of course, I've got a slope about close to a 1/4 inch bubble slope, higher here, lower here, so water is going to drain off. That's probably the number one thing I can recommend is to actually do a liquid applied membrane. And hopefully, as the summer progresses, I've got another cabin over here I'll be building, and we'll actually go into the details on different membranes. This one, as it weathers for the summer, and a new one that we'll be doing on another build. And I'm hoping to do a pebbled full membrane liquid applied, but with a pebble embedded in it. That will be a nice deck for that one. That's the number one thing. Second thing that I like to do is it has to be covered. As you see on this deck here, I've got it fully covered. I don't like to have decks exposed. Again, that keeps the water off the deck. Now I've got a section over here where I've got a vaulted ceiling where you can come out and sit and receive the sun on that. Now, if you want sun and you want to get some sun on your face, I can understand that. But if you want to avoid weathering and maintenance issues on that deck, you want to have it covered. All right, third thing is if you do have a railing system, try to avoid as many penetrations down into the substrate as you possibly can. Because if you're in a snow environment, like about 3 days ago, we had snow here, I was shoveling it and I had at least a good per code clearance there. So I was able to shovel the snow out and get it off the deck. I only had like about 1.5 feet of snow. There was no snow from here on. Again, that's because I had a covered deck. The other thing I like to do is if I have any beams and support structures, I don't like to go with what the minimum structural requirement is. I like to beef that up. Now, these here are 8x8 beams. I've done 6x6 beams, but I don't like to go below that, mainly for aesthetic appeals, but also for real structural support on this entire deck. I've got a lot of strength on this deck because I've got so much support here. The most important, after a liquid applied membrane, is your ledger board. Now, you've seen a lot of decks. There's been so many deck failures over the years because when they take a ledger board, which is probably a 2x10, 2x12, material, and they mount it to the home, then they have the truss supports, being mounted on that hanger on that ledger board. Our ledger board here is pretty beefy. We actually used engineered LVL dimensional lumber, mounted it to the actual concrete with Titan screws. And we only needed to have one, but we did two. So that's actually mounted to the foundation, 16 inches on center, all the way around the entire perimeter of this complete wraparound deck. And that is adding, again, incredible support. And below this deck, we have, again, aluminum lid covering that for complete protection and also for ease of maintenance. One other thing I want to mention here is when you do have a deck and you do have a threshold situation, if you're in an environment with a lot of rain that's going to sheet against the home, you do want to have a step. You know me, I like to have 0 thresholds. But on this situation, I need to keep the water away from getting inside that home. And here in a really, really bad snowstorm, you could have snow pile up against that. So as it starts to melt, you want it to work away from from the home itself. So you can't see it here, but behind here, I have this entire threshold. Before the windows were installed, I have it taped and decked with the product that I mentioned in another video, which I'll put a link below. Video came out a week or two ago on how to seal up the transition between your foundation and your frame structure. I actually have that completely here, and it came up against the wall before we put our batten boards on. so that the entire wall system is completely sealed from any water getting inside that home. And of course, this is per code, but I've seen a lot of people make this mistake that down here, I've got a good clearance from my batten board, and this is hardy material, which is a better fire retardant than actual wood product. And I had that membrane going up and behind the hardy board. So if I actually wanted to hose off here, I could hose off to my heart's content all day long here, and water is not going to get inside that home. Again, water issues, maintenance of water, that's going to be your biggest enemy. If you don't do that right, you're going to have a real problem down the road. Again, these are some principles I go after when I build a deck. Again, fully covered membrane, a lot of the other things I've talked about, and I hope these principles are going to help you. I've got another massive deck coming on board later in this summer. I'll do another video on that with a little tweaks that I'm going to do. But again, this here is how I build a deck and how I make sure that I don't have to maintain that deck year after year. This is going to be a deck that's going to last for a very long time. This is Keith with How to Build Your Own Home.